about Menelik's passing has already been used, and that's what I felt, right? Menelik is 10 years younger than me, and he looked healthy and was doing his thing, and you don't expect him to dead. So I found it shocking, and I didn't even believe, but the person who gave me the information that he passed had the information. They knew where he died, what he died of, and so on. So I had to believe. And the first thing to do was obviously condolences to his daughter, who I don't know well, but I know, so I did that. And then the next response was a kind of anger, because what our brothers say, England is a bitch. Forgive me because of the sexism of the expression, but it's absolutely right. How can somebody who had the kind of debut that Menelik had not be given money to make another film like that, even if he turned out not to be up to it, which this man was? And the racism of this place did Menelik great harm. And it's important that we know and register that is so. I did some stuff with Menelik, with CEDDO, that being talked about there. Sometimes things get mixed up, and I wrote the commentary for Brother Garon, and I see a version of it, and it says Mike Lyon wrote it, and I know how it happened. Mike spoke the commentary, and somehow Menelik managed to accidentally put Mike as both writer and speaker of the commentary. Doesn't particularly matter.
But it's true.
Of course, I wouldn't be saying it wasn't true. Anyway, Menelik was a remarkable man. That's already been said. When we opened up and all of those words about him, all of it is true. He was a remarkable man. And what struck me about him was the way in which he reflected and chronicled massively creatively this place, but also a bigger black world than that. And it's important that we understand the scope of this guy, right? Because he was actually massive. I worked with him on 500 years. What's it?
Time and judgment.
Yeah, time and judgment. It's incredible. Menelik understood so much. He understood the significance of John Barnes's past, that man didn't convert, and inside of this film, which is about highly spiritual, right? He's talking football, and he's talking 500 years of black people's history, and he knew that the history wasn't 500 years, but 5,000 or 5 million, and he could talk about all of that stuff and put it on film meaningfully. A really remarkable brother. Now, I spent a glorious summer, I think it was 95, with him in JA, making the film Catch a Fire. And just watching Menelik at work. Now, I was supposed to be the researcher, and he brought me on as the researcher, but by the time I got to Jamaica and started to do the research, Menelik had done it all already. Right? So I'm down as the researcher, but it's Menelik who did the research. He'd reached out to all of the people of significance connected to the issue of Paul Bogle, and it was all in the document that you already. So I'm only formally the researcher on that film, but Menelik actually did the research. And just watching him at work. There's a scene in there, not quite right, but it works beautifully, where obviously, well, not obvious, Paul Bogle was a farmer, right? And amongst the things that he grew was sweet potatoes. So there's a scene in there where he assembles these sweet potatoes, and they're coming out of the hole. And if you know about sweet potatoes, you know that they don't come out in the way that you see them in the market. They come out full of dirt, right? But Menelik uses ones that came from the market. They're already dry. But the scene works, right? Because what he's doing is representing the connection between Bogle and the soil and the kind of thing that he really was just technically and incredibly able, creative, almost genius of a filmmaker. And Menelik was extraordinary in other ways. I'm now in my 77th year, and Menelik is the only person who's ever called me from another continent. I think I was living in Jamaica at the time, to give me some spiritual advice unsolicited. Right? It was sound stuff, right? And he'd been moved, I think he said, either by the ancestors or the universe, which may of course be the same thing, to call me and tell me that he was worried or concerned that really happened, right? Got this call, I'm living in Jamaica, and Menelik called me to give me some spiritual advice. And the extraordinary thing about him and his work is how he evolved along with the movement and learned from it and chronicled it. So, and he was the revolutionary can be used. Step forward, youth. The next line is in Babylon a brute, right? And Menelik knew that and wanted to tell it and told it beautifully. That's why two of his films, they managed to put one on, and the people who funded the People's Account were perfectly prepared to give the money. I mean, the 50,000 or whatever wasn't anything to them. But they couldn't deal with the truth. And somewhere in there, we talk about the right to self-defense against oppression. And they weren't going to put that on the box for any, yeah, it didn't matter. Even if it cost $1 million, it wouldn't have got on there. Yeah? And they came up with some idiotic thing about putting it on with a framing discussion. Menelik said, "Go from me." that never happened. And of course, you know, people who know, so I am really sorry that Menelik...
Sorry, that film, Menelik actually produced it. It was actually directed by another guy called Hilton Bryan, but the producer was Menelik.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm really shocked and distressed that Menelik has passed at 67 because he had really a great deal more to give, and I hope that the other people who are into filmmaking take up the mantle and make some more films, right? Menelik taught the experience of oppression. Menelik taught the aspiration of revolution. Menelik was into spirituality in a real way, and it matters that this brother who was also into love and searching for it appears to have found a very high instance of it with his present partner. So I'm glad he found that version of love in his own lifetime, and together they were actually exploring other meanings of love as well, presumably as a sexual one and so on. Thank you.
Yes.